Welcome into Wingin' It Wednesday. It is 7:08 now at News Talk 96.5 KPEL. Welcome in to our panelists, Carol Ross, Warren Cottle, and Stafford Barnett. I hear I missed an exciting Wingin' It Wednesday last week. I'm kind of disappointed. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Missed a fun one.
Good morning.
Missed a fun one. So I'm going to take Bernie's chair, and I'm going to keep time today. And Derek has all the topics. We're going to kind of run through some of these and look at lots of back and forth, so we'll take some of your calls as well.
Sure. So our first topic this morning on Wingin' It Wednesday is about the Iberia Parish Levee Board vote that's going on this Saturday. The levee board there is looking to construct a levee, a 19-mile levee across the Iberia Parish coastline. And there has been some contention about it. A lot of people are saying this federal funding that we need to raise the money for with the proposition to match the Go Mesa funds is something that we don't necessarily need, and a lot of taxpayers in Iberia Parish don't necessarily need or want or can afford the extra tax money. So starting with Stafford, what do you think we should be doing along the lines of this proposition?
I think the Iberia Parish residents have a tough decision to make, right? From what I've read, it seems like the majority of Jeanerette didn't flood, but the outlighting areas did. And so the main opposition to it seems like it's come from the people who haven't been affected by it, right?
Right.
The taxes for 5 mills, right? So 1,000ths of the value of your property, less $75,000 of the homestead exemption, right? So if you have a $200,000 home in Iberia Parish, it's going to cost you about $625 a year. And it's tough. I mean, again, I keep harping on this, but from my perspective, we come from a lineage, like the Cajuns come from a lineage who are famous for diverting water up in Canada, right? That was
Absolutely.
their thing. They got up there
With the Aboiteau systems.
right?
Yeah.
And they took some land that was pretty inhospitable, and they made it in a place that was a great place to live, right? And they've got a tough decision to make. So I hope that they find a solution to their flooding problems. We're kind of in a similar situation. So it's a regional issue, right? Now they flood into a different river that we get into. There's only so many ways to get the water out. But I hope that they find that they do what's best for their community.
Warren, we've seen people such as Attorney General Jeff Landry come out. He is a native of the area, backing this proposal. What do you think? What's your take on it?
Actually, I have no idea what the people in Iberia Parish need to do. I know the flooding is a problem, and it certainly needs a lot of attention. And I really, it's up to them. They just, whatever they decide to do. I will say this, going back to last week and the things that were said, the things that I have harked on about the FEMA map and how did it overlay with the flood and all of this, that, and other. As I was leaving, Janet stopped me because some man called here and wanted my contact information. And so he called me, and he said he was a civil engineer and a registered surveyor. And he said, I just want to tell you that you were 100% right on every bit of that. He said that that FEMA map absolutely overlaid just about exactly where the floods came. And he said, we've been fighting that thing for years trying to get it adopted. And he said, some people don't know this, but he said, the Corps of Engineers appropriated money back in the 1950s to dredge the Vermilion River. And he said that thing is so silted up now. He said that it never has been done because I think Lafayette Parish and Vermilion Parish both fought it, that they didn't want it done. And if you just dredge that river out, that river for 35 miles dredged 10 feet deep can hold billions and billions of gallons of flood water, just the river itself. And so he said, those things taken into consideration, he said, I agree with everything you said, and it is a problem that needs to be addressed, and nobody wants to really address the real problem.
Mm-hmm.
Carol, those for it say it's an investment into the future. Those against it say it's a tax burden. What do you think?
Well, it is going to be a tax burden for a lot of people. It's a pretty hefty price tag on this thing, and there's no guarantee that the state and federal money will come through if it comes timely, if it comes through at all, and that's the problem. I've had both sides on my program, and they both make very good points. So it's really going to be a toss-up. I couldn't read how most of the people who called my program while the folks were on were against it because of the hefty price tag and because of the uncertainty of whether the state and federal money would come through. It's really overall going to cost between $500 and $600 million. But yes, you're right. Attorney General Jeff Landry called in, and he was very passionate about it. In fact, both sides are very passionate. There was a meeting held in Jeanerette recently, and of course they pointed out that Jeanerette never flooded, and so I guess they're trying to get people to see that. The other point that some of the folks made, and there are people who have a lot more expertise, than I can even dream of, who feel that it could also create a bowl-like effect, but they have structures that are going to be release valves, et cetera. So it's up to the people in Iberia Parish have a really tough decision to make here. $5 million, pretty hefty.
We are going to have on Friday in the 8 o'clock hour the executive director of the Iberia Parish Levee Board, which is independent of local government there.
Yes.
Which I think is a key detail of it.
The chairman or the executive, Mr. Freeman? You're having
Yes,
Mr. Freeman on?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, he's a very articulate advocate for it.
Just generally, Stafford, I'm curious, your experience, you talked about it a lot last week. You actually had more flooding in your garage. It didn't make it into your house last week.
Yeah.
Is there, just for the whole area, Iberia included, Lafayette included, do we need as Warren has talked about with the FEMA maps, do we need a plan to deal with the FEMA map now, or when does that time come?
I'll be honest with you, I know very little about the FEMA maps, right? I know that my house is in a 500-year flood zone. That doesn't change with the FEMA map, right? Mm-hmm. That's what I know about that. I will say that a regional solution is something that we need, right? We do need to clear our backlog here for Lafayette, right? But we also need a regional solution, and we've got some money set aside to do that from the federal government, which is outside of kind of our control. We agreed to pull it together and put together a group of experts to say, hey, what can we do to take care of the areas that drain those communities, right? Mm-hmm. So if I'm not mistaken, I think Iberia Parish is drained by the Tesh, and then our community is more for the Vermilion, yeah. Right?
Yeah. So a couple of hydrologists called the show and did mention Lake Penier.
As one,
and
too.
say as one
yeah.
also.
The best idea I felt I've heard is leveeing the swamp behind the airport, because the Vermilion initial flooding flows upstream, and allowing that water to flow back into the swamp, pumping it in there, storing it in there for when the rain stops, and then slowly releasing it over time and drawing that down. It's just really, really expensive.
Yeah, Warren, wrap this one up for us.
Yeah. What the FEMA map does, you said it really doesn't apply or something, but what FEMA map does,
to my house. I didn't say to the community.
It redraws. It may apply to your house. I don't know.
No, I've checked it. It doesn't.
Okay. Well, anyway, he said that what happened is on that previous map that some of those base marks have been found to be 1 to 2 feet off. That's a lot of distance. A lot of water. 1 to 2 feet, and if you go with the new FEMA map, there's so many more places that are going to be considered in the flood zone, which right now they're not required to carry flood insurance. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people who are buying this said, well, I'm not in a flood zone, so I am safe. Yeah. In which, in fact, you're not.
All right, we're going to talk about the State Police LACE program that has just been suspended when we return with our Wingin' It Wednesday panelists. Wingin' It Wednesday brought to you each and every week by Service Cadillac, 1212 and 1214 Ambassador Caffrey, where today is Wash It Up Wednesday at the Wash. Hey, why have a nice ride if it's not going to be a clean ride? Go make a pass over there. Oh, gosh, I'm now officially back in Louisiana. Just said go make a pass. That's pretty serious for me.
Anyway, pass by.
Go pass by,
and get down. And get down.
Don't get down because you'll get wet. Don't get down. I've done that inside there before. Anyway, this is Wingin' It Wednesday, brought to you by Service Chevrolet Cadillac. Go see them at 717 now at News Talk 96.5
It's
KPEL.
Wingin' It Wednesday, driven by Service Chevrolet Cadillac.
Welcome into Wingin' It Wednesday. Today we're heading into topic number 2, talking about some state issues that we are facing with law enforcement. Apparently, State Police Superintendent Colonel Kevin Reeves has ordered a review and suspended the LACE program, that's the Local Agency Compensated Enforcement, and placed some troopers on administrative leave after reviewing surveillance footage provided by a New Orleans TV station. As far as this LACE program works within the state, offering some community support for local law enforcement.
Or overtime payments.
Yeah,
there's call that.
There's a lot of fiscal issues coming out with this one. As far as that goes, what are the implications that we're going to see with the LACE program being suspended. Carol, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Well, what are the implications of all of the scandals involving the state police over the past few years? It's really very troubling, this whole thing. I mean, Lee Zurich, of course, did another magnificent job investigating this, and we've had it on the show yesterday afternoon. It's far more detailed than we can get into in 2 minutes here on the show. Far more detailed, but very troubling. When this guy made almost as much, well, more in overtime, and they camped out because they could not get a straight answer from anybody. So they camped out, and they actually surveilled his home overnight, etc. Mm-hmm. They checked his time cards and realized that he was lying through his teeth on all of this stuff, and his supervisors were letting it go. They had to know he could not have worked. I mean, Superman couldn't have worked that many hours.
It was like several days straight of like 18 plus hours.
Yes,
I mean,
over and over again. And this on top of, the side trips that were taken on the way to the conference to San Diego, et cetera. It just goes on and on. Darrell Thomas is the trooper that is the worst offender, but he was not the only one. And this LACE program, it's called Local Agency Compensated Enforcement. So it's sort of like, it sort of incentivizes the 44 parishes that, participate. They hire troopers to write tickets on highways in those parishes, allowed them to do that. And so that's how they were able to make the overtime. But man, oh man, this is a very troubling thing. I mean, they shelled out about, $147,000 in overtime just for that one guy?
And let me tell you, it's a huge moneymaker, so it was really hard to get tickets with this notation on the top ever changed because they knew it funded this program.
Right, and the legislative auditor is involved now, and so I think the legislative auditor, but this really, there needs to be a serious investigation from top to bottom of the state police. It really shakes you to your core because they were always kind of like the elite in law enforcement in our state, and you see this kind of thing happening over and over again. There seems to be a pattern developing here.
And the pattern is definitely there. Apparently, in 2010, there was an inquiry by the State Inspector General's office who faulted the agency for inconsistent methods to document overtime. That's what they called it. Mm-hmm. Warren, this is now 2017. This is 7 years ago that it started as far as investigations go. Where's this going to lead?
Yeah, and as usual, in honor of transparency and honesty, I must say that I have firsthand knowledge of this program since I got a ticket.
That's the best way to get to know it, I guess.
In this program,
up close and personal.
I was clocked actually in St. Landry Parish, but I wasn't stopped till I got into Lafayette Parish. And the thing that a couple things. One, it was raining whenever I was clocked, and Terry Landry told me, he said, they're not supposed to run radar in the rain. And of course, everybody, I know, and most people know that rain can affect the radar reading. So anyway, so you start putting these things together. Plus, it was out there by sunset, and that there are those signs on the south side of town and one on the north side of town that show your speed as you're driving. Those things consistently showed my speed anywhere from 2 to 10 miles an hour below what my speedometer was showing. And so then my question was, are they calibrated? And the trooper says, I don't know. He said, I don't have anything to do with it. So anyway, I said, that's the classic case of entrapment. When the government sits there and does something that entices you to break the law and then turns around and arrest you for it or whatever. So when I really started looking into this thing, and I asked a retired state trooper what the deal was with this ticket where the guy did not put down there what I was clocked with, whether it was radar, laser, or whatever. And he said, well, that is a special detailed ticket because that little B in the block. I said, what does that mean? He said, probably lace. And he starts explaining it. All right, so let's start looking at this thing. Come to find out, why that he let me get into Lafayette Parish. The ticket was issued on March the 11th. As it turns out, St. Landry Parish stopped working with the state police on March the 1st because St. Landry Parish was no longer paying their money over to the state police. What happens to the LACE money? I asked the district attorney in both St. Landry Parish and Stutes. Stutes' office hung up on me twice, and I tried to get some information from them. Where does this money go? One of the lawyers told me, he said, hell, it's a damn slush fund. He said, it's handled by like a judge or two and a district attorney, and said nobody knows where the money really goes. They spend it any way they want to. It does not go in the general fund. And that is why like 2/3 of the tickets written, I think, or more of them, more than not, come out of the LACE program. And my point is, and I told the DA who's prosecuting me, I said, I clearly intend to bring up this thing, all these points, and also the deal with the state police falsifying records and all. And I'm going to read the judge's charge to a jury about impeaching the testimony of a witness who had said if they have a financial stake in the outcome of this trial, which he clearly does, then they do. And so then they drop the charges.
So a lot of this happened.
Way to go, Warren.
A lot of this happened under the Edmondson administration, which he's no longer the head of. It's 4 of about 800 troopers, all in the New Orleans area, none from around here. Does it just show a breakdown in management maybe in that area?
Yeah. So I think there's 2 major points here, right? I believe that, and I've said it on the show, I'll say it again. I think that one of the hardest jobs in the United States is being a police officer, because it requires a lot of a person, a lot of a commitment, and I don't want to judge a whole unit by the actions of a couple. That being said, they only really had their eyes on a couple, right? There's no telling how much more is out there. I think that when we've got our priorities, in my opinion, back there a little bit, just because if you're required to self-fund your organization through catching people doing the wrong thing, you're technically incentivized to go out and write as many tickets as possible. And you know, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure as a society we've said that quotas were, you know, unethical or illegal.
Yeah,
right?
well, illegal in this state. Yeah,
right. So I feel for the good guy state trooper, right, who didn't do anything wrong, who maybe picked up a couple of overtime hours, and are now suffering the consequences because of the actions of a few. So I think that if we're going to revamp the whole system, I think one of the ways we need to look at it is how we fund their budget.
I think it's interesting where this only came out not because of an internal investigation, not because of a complaint to the department that they looked into. Lee Zurich, one of the few reporters that are left, definitely in this state, a lot of time nationally in local newsrooms, where he doesn't have a demand to have a story every night. He can work on something for 2 weeks. He can kind of look into these things. Obviously, they could sit out.
Like years.
And look out at things.
Like years.
And I'll tell you, kudos to the management at WVUE, because we continue to see the original Las Vegas stuff was uncovered by Lee Zurich. He's also had I think you had it on your show, Carol. Was it the prescription, the insurance companies, the way they were charging the prescriptions, totally differently, how stores sold them.
The prescription benefit manager situation, that is coming to a head. Fred Mills was on the show, and we're going to have a meeting about that soon.
Anyway, so kudos to Lee Zurich on that. All right, let's going to wrap up this segment. We're going to move on to some national issues coming up next on Wingin' It Wednesday. When we're back next on Acadiana's Morning News, Wingin' It Wednesday, brought to you by Service Chevrolet Cadillac. Stay with us. It's 7:27.
Acadiana's talk station. News Talk 96.5, KPEL. It's Wingin' It Wednesday, driven by Service Chevrolet Cadillac.
Welcome back to Wingin' It Wednesday. We're heading into national topics as we touch on a topic number 3. And here's a name that we've been hearing in headlines for the past 3 days or more. Judge Roy Moore.
Yeah. Good pun.
Or more.
That wasn't intended. But thank you.
Good dad joke.
Right. Well, Judge Roy Moore resigned. We're hearing more accusations. He now has 5 accusers saying that decades ago, putting him against some sexual allegations there. And now, as Rob mentioned earlier in this show, Sean Hannity is putting an ultimatum on his boy Roy Moore, saying, look, I need an explanation in 24 hours or he's backing off.
Wow.
So
Roy Moore was on his show yesterday. I think that's what led to the.
No, it wasn't yesterday. It was a couple of days ago.
Maybe it was on Friday's show.
Yeah.
And there was just kind of some weird. He asked him outright, "Did you date teenagers?" And he said, "Well, generally, no."
Oh no!
He equivocated all through, and that's what really troubled Sean.
If you're going to destroy your Keurig, you can send it. I'd give you my home address. Just send it to KPEL, and I'll pick him up here. Okay.
Your Keurigs, gosh, I think that's wrapped up. Warren, you want to kick this one off? What's the session going to do? Sorry, I didn't mean to say sessions. I meant to say what's Moore going to do. That's our next topic.
I really don't know. There's so many troubling things in this from day one. That one is that these alleged things happened when he was a Democrat, and so what's the big deal? I mean,
well, yeah,
name me one Democrat that's ever faced scrutiny over sexual improprieties and such stuff as that, whether it was boys, girls, men, women, underage, overage, or whatever,
Dead.
That's the one, yeah. Some of them even death. And one of the things, that would come to light is that, has any money been paid to any of these women to come forward? You remember Larry Flint, when he offered the $1 million reward to anybody who would come forward and say that they had sexual contacts with any member of Congress or whatever? My brother asked a friend of his who was in state government in Tennessee, he said, is that also going to extend down to the state level? Because if it does, I'm getting ready to get $1 million.
Oh, gosh.
Wow.
Or a Starbucks gift card or something.
Not that my brother had any contact with, but my brother knew several people who had, which was, we understand that. But, the deal with Roy Moore is that I don't know what the truth is, and I really think that it's a sad situation all the way around. That, my first impression was that Mitch McConnell and John McCain and them, they were so outraged over this deal. Where was their outrage been all in the past? Where was the outrage with Trent Lott? Where was the outrage with Larry Craig? Where was the outrage with any of this stuff, And all at once now. But there's other things that more I understand. He's a graduate of the U.S. Military Academy, as Moon likes to point out, the Honor Code. He was a captain in the Army. In Vietnam, I just find it awfully hard to believe that you got a West Point graduate, former Army captain, 30-something years old, running around chasing 14, 15, 16-year-old girls. But then again, in his autobiography, I understand he put in there that he slept on sandbags in Vietnam in his cot afraid he might get fragged. Well, that's kind of a Hillary Clinton kind of thing about landing under sniper fire, if you ask me. And if he was that horrible of an officer that you thought your own men were going to kill you, then that says a lot about you too.
Good point. Stafford, we were even seeing Republicans now coming out and saying if he is elected, we're going to kick him out of the Senate.
Yeah,
Where do you think it stands?
This is a really sad situation. So, Roy was accused by 4 people. It came out all at once, and then a 5th accuser came out, and then a local mall came out and said that they had to ban him from the mall because he was chasing young girls there. And then I think at 37 years old, somewhere in there, he got married to a 23-year-old. Right. So look. Yeah, that's true. If you look,
he's currently married to her, right?
Yeah, he's stuck it through. And
what's wrong with that?
Look, I'm just saying there's a pattern here, right? And look, it's tough for me to justify pedophilia, right? Because preying on underage children is pedophilia, and a lot of people haven't used that word, but where there's smoke, there's fire, right? And even Jeff Sessions has come out and said, "Hey, I believe the accusers." Alabama's got a tough situation on their hands. They've got they have put this guy over the other Republican, and a write-in campaign is very hard to do. And I think he's going to get elected, right? I think he's not going to step down, and I think he's going to get elected. And then there's a good chance we'll be having a special election again. Roy Moore, for all intents and purposes, is a pedophile, right? And if I couldn't, in good conscience, have that person representing me, right? When we send a group of high schoolers to Washington to go learn civics, right, and tour the White House and tour Congress, are we going to have to say, hey, avoid Roy Moore's office?
Good point. Carol?
Well, we have a long history of sexual deviance in the House and the Senate and the White House, for that matter, and not that long ago, not 40 years ago, as with this guy. It's reprehensible both ways. If it's true, it's reprehensible. If it's not true, it's even more reprehensible because you're destroying a man. What's troubling to me is that the Republicans, didn't lickety-split, jumped out there, right? McConnell. I think this is McConnell. He is so angry that he got his head handed to him in Alabama by Judge Roy Moore. And of all things, McConnell values, prizes, lusts after power more than anything else. And anything that could undercut his aura of power, I believe, really hurt him. Now, whether that has anything to do with the real situation here, I don't know. It's reprehensible, as I said, on both sides. If it's true, if it's not true, it's reprehensible because you're destroying a man based on politics. But if we have a long history of believing things that ended up not being true, going back to the Salem witch trials. 19 people were hanged or burned at the stake. And it was because of, hysteria by some young women who accused others of being witches and all that. So we have a problem here because we haven't been able to nail it down. It's a pattern, yes. We have more recent examples, and we saw testimony yesterday that there are currently people serving, both Democrats and Republicans, who are under investigation for this kind of thing. If Roy Moore's situation calls more attention to the people who are already there doing these kinds of things, to a president who did this, to a former senator called the Lion of the Senate who ended up killing a young woman because he didn't want it to get out that he was doing, extramarital affairs, etc. So we have a long history of this, and it is reprehensible, all of it. So it needs to end. But the spectacle of these Republicans and Democrats just jumping out there and acting so upset and offended is just beyond hypocritical.
So when the fifth accuser came out, one of the things she said was, just so you know, politics is not part of this. Me and my husband supported Donald Trump. I'm not a Democrat trying to kill a Republican candidate. Where does this leave it? Does that even have any weight?
Well, it's a smart woman. I'll say that, it gives her credibility. Can I tell one quick Alabama story?
Except that she hired Gloria Allred.
We had, during the Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas hearings, I don't know if anybody remembers that or not. It happened a long, long time ago. And Senator Hal Heflin from Alabama was a Democrat, weighed about 400 pounds, and he was a former member of the Alabama Supreme Court. And the big deal is that we were treating women different than we should have and treating them like second-class citizens and whatever. Nobody wanted to believe Anita Hill. Well, Hal Heflin sitting up there during this hearing, and finally he said, "Miss Hill, are you a scorned woman?" When he said that, it was just like a shockwave went out across the nation. I think, how ignorant can you be, old man?
Yeah. Well, and you've had incidences, maybe not necessarily wrapped around the sexual issue, but you had Ray Donovan. Anybody remember Ray Donovan?
Yeah,
Labor Secretary, totally vilified until finally, he was exonerated, and then he said, "Where do I go to get my reputation back?" Yeah. He's not the only one. Scooter Libby. This history is littered with people who were falsely accused. So I would like to wait until we get more evidence of this. But I think anybody who expected Sean Hannity to go easy on the guy,
wait, he's kind of changed his tune.
No,
now,
he's done that twice now. He's nailed them twice.
If you could wrap this one up.
Yeah, I think that we get into these dangerous cycles of whataboutisms where we're talking about a very specific circumstance and we talk about other people who've gone through it when really we need to measure everything on a case-by-case basis, right? And the case-by-case basis says that there is a predator running for that spot, right? And the worst part of it is that he was the prosecutor, right, at the time. So he told these girls, he goes, "Nobody's going to believe you. And I'm the one responsible for prosecuting people like me," right? And when you take that kind of abuse of power, my hope is that that we find some sort of, if allegations can be proven in the court of law, which I'm fairly certain the statute of limitations has passed, that we find some sort of punishment for this guy, right? He has been historically neglected the law, right? He was told by the Supreme Court to take down the 10 Commandments. He didn't do it. He got kicked off the bench. He was told by the Supreme Court that the decision about gay marriage has been made, and he refused to do it. He was kicked off the bench again. And look, his citizens elected him again, right? So again, I always tell people you get the government you deserve, but I, in good conscience, wouldn't want a pedophile representing me.
Well, I have to mention the Allred thing. I almost always think when you have Gloria Allred standing on the side of you, just because the kind of fame that she likes and the kind of notoriety. However, it tells me 100% that accuser didn't call Gloria Allred. You better believe Gloria Allred had people going to find her because it's going to push her into the limelight.
Because she has so much credibility. She and her daughter both, who covered for Harvey Weinstein. How many years?
It's crazy. Yeah. All right, 7:42 now at News Talk 96.5 KPEL. We're back with more Wingin' It Wednesday. Welcome back to Acadiana's Morning News, Wingin' It Wednesday, as exciting as ever. Wingin' It Wednesday with Carol Ross, Warren Cottle, and Stafford Barnett. We love having you guys in each and every week to talk about the issues at hand. And in addition to, we talked about some tax issues, some local ones coming up. Yesterday, a lot of people still talking about this morning, the hours-long hearing before the Senate Judiciary panel with Attorney General Jeff Sessions. So we're kind of waiting to see what happens with it. It seemed like he got a little bit intimidated about halfway through and kind of got confused about some details. But Stafford, we'll start with you and then make it through our panel. What does this mean for him, for the Russia investigation? Of course, as the Senate Judiciary panel continues to have questions, but it was kind of all over the place. Like the questions, they were absolutely all over the place.
They were. I watched it, and I can tell you, he's in a tough situation. You know, he basically came out and said, "I remembered all these accusations when it came out in the press," and he conveniently only remembered the things that would, exonerate him from criminal charges. Right. So, look, I feel for the guy, right, because I think he went in and supported Trump right off the bat. Some of Trump's associates made some big mistakes. I think Don Jr. made a big mistake. I think his lack of experience in politics, told him that it was okay to communicate with WikiLeaks, which we know is an arm of the Russian government now. And look, the irony in me even saying that is I was a big WikiLeaks supporter for a long time, and it seems like something's changed with those guys where they're just putting out some really tough info, and the CIA has even come out and said, "Hey, we can't trust those guys," right? And look, we're getting conflicting reports, right? Donald Trump is going to Putin and say, "Hey, I trust you," and then the CIA is having to come back and go, "Look, you're undermining our integrity," right? That these guys are Putin has won, right? This was a bigger success than he could ever have hoped for. So Jeff Sessions is in a tight situation, and the question yesterday was pretty colorful. How the great point was made, right? Jeff Sessions prosecuted a police officer who testified one thing under oath and then came back and changed his testimony when he remembered it differently, right? And prosecuted him for perjury. And the reason this was brought up is because he talked about it when he voted to impeach Clinton for perjury and everything else that was done, right? And this was brought to him. He goes, why should we hold you to a different standard than you've held other people? If you're saying that what you did wasn't wrong, but the guy that you prosecuted years ago when you were a prosecutor was doing something wrong, why should we hold you to a different standard? So I think that's what he's asking people to do. The guy, if he's changing his testimony under oath, then the first time he lied, right? And that's perjury. And so he's in a tough situation. The Russian thing just keeps getting bigger and bigger. We've heard on this show and various others that it's a nothing burger. We've seen enough prosecutions to know that that's just not correct. So it's just going to keep getting more and more interesting. Time will tell.
Carol, will his past continue to haunt him, or is there kind of an outliving of that stuff?
Jeff Sessions' past. Oh, I think what's going on right now is haunting him. But you have to look. The whole thing was wrapped around this Papadopoulos. He was at the meeting, and Sessions didn't remember the guy. He didn't remember the guy because the guy had no serious role. Michael Caputo, who's one of Trump's advisors, and actually Sarah Huckabee Sanders, very early in this whole thing, said, Papadopoulos. Well, he was an unpaid volunteer, kind of like a hanger-on, like a wannabe, and probably contributed money. And so, you know how that goes in a campaign. There are a lot of hangers-on that always represent themselves in a certain way. Actually, Michael Caputo said he was the coffee boy. He said you might have called him a foreign policy analyst, but he was going. If he was going to wear a wire, all we would have known now is whether he prefers a caramel macchiato over regular American coffee. He said that's how insignificant the guy was, and it's very understandable that Sessions would have forgotten being in that meeting with him because there were all sorts of other people in that meeting. And if they're hanging it, Assange has said over and over again, not that I trust him very much, but that the Russians were not the source of the information that he got. He has said that over and over again. He will not say who the source is. I think he's still trying to hold out to make a deal to tell everything that he knows. You know, I mean, he's still
for
out
asylum.
there.
In exchange for asylum
well,
somewhere.
just for being able to be a free man.
Yeah, just being out, yeah.
So anyway, what is more troubling to me is what's really going on now with these shadow brokers that have broken into the NSA, worse than Snowden, worse than anything Snowden ever did. And it's going on, and nobody's paying attention to it because we have this show trial going on in Washington. And the real people who are really trying to undermine the country are getting away with it.
All right, Warren, long series of questions yesterday. Stafford kind of hit on it. It seemed like WikiLeaks almost started as a public service. Like, we're just over here in the corner, and we're just going to slide things out. Now it seems to be very carefully curated leaks. Does this play into Sessions going forward?
I have always said they were very carefully curated leaks because I said from day one that those things were coming probably straight out of the NSA, from people who were just upset with the direction that the management of the intelligence groups were going, and especially that one candidate who was running for president named Hillary Rodham Clinton, and that's where I think all of those leaks.
Dennis Rodman Clinton?
Yes, Dennis Rodman Clinton.
Yeah, Hillary Rodham Clinton. Don't you know where that came from?
No, tell us where.
Well, that came from Jesse Jackson. When Bill Clinton first got elected, Jesse was going up there to visit.
What he's doing.
He was going up there to visit Bill Clinton, and when he came out, they had all the microphones up there, and so the press asked him what the president had to say. He said, "Well, I really didn't talk to the president. I talked to Hillary Rodham Clinton," and so that's what several people started calling her from then on, which I do too. But anyway, that. WikiLeaks, I think, has done a great service, and I think they continue to do a great service. And I think when this thing is all said and done, that is where it's going to come out. It's not going to be people that hacked in there. It's just virtually impossible to hack into those systems. Just about impossible. But, it's been said over and over and over, the weakest link in security, especially in technical security, is the human element.
All right, we have about 2 minutes left. Stafford.
Yeah, so what you just said about hacking was completely incorrect. The hacking is something that is a major problem, and it happens often. So the couple of things about what Assange just said. So pre-2010, Assange was openly saying, we never take sources because we never want to be compromised. But now with this Russian investigation, he keeps saying over and over again, our sources weren't the Russians. Like, he knows who they are. So there's some integrity issues with what's happened. So in 2010, something changed. The WikiLeaks came out and said, we've got a major announcement about Russia. All of a sudden, it stopped, right? Nothing kind of came out about it. And if you look at the conversations between WikiLeaks and Don Jr. saying, hey, if we leak this, it'll look more credible. So it's been really strategic about the disinformation campaign that Russia's been using WikiLeaks with Don Jr., right, to try to get this stuff out. So, the cards are just starting to fall, right? I think everybody's nervous. Everybody's trying to figure out how they can get immunity. And I think we're going to see more and more prosecutions.
All right,
well,
Carol, we have 1 minute left. Go ahead.
Congress is very clearly going after the disinformation that's coming from our own intelligence agencies. As Warren has said, the shadow brokers, as that becomes more aware in people's awareness that this is a really dangerous thing. It's coming from the NSA. Remember, Snowden got himself positioned just so as an outside contractor with Booz Allen Hamilton. He got himself positioned so that he could steal the files and take them. There are people within the NSA who are doing this. And the troubling thing is that phony, crazy dossier was used as a pretext for wiretapping not only private citizens, but citizens who are in your opposing campaign. This goes to the heart of our democratic republic, and it's very troubling.
All right, we're running out of time. Warren, you get a second.
I just want to say I take great offense to what Stafford just said, but I didn't know what I was talking about penetrating the NSA and the CIA communications.
It's hacking. It was a private server in her bathroom.
Hold on. What I was talking about was people penetrating the NSA and the CIA communications and those kind of things and stealing that information. It's virtually impossible unless you have got access that somebody has given you.
And let us remember that the CIA has developed programs where they can mimic the hacking style of any nation in the world. If they want to do it, they can make it look like it was Russia or China or anybody else.
I didn't realize we were on InfoWars this morning.
Wrap it up. What, you get the last word.
Look, This is a scary situation. I think that again, I stand by what I said earlier. I think the Russians have gotten more out of this than they ever anticipated doing. That being said, we have an election Saturday. Yep. Get out and vote.
Go out and vote. Saturday's the day, and then we will know. Next week, we'll talk about the outcomes of the election. It's going to be a pre-Thanksgiving show, so maybe we'll have to break out the smoked salmon. All right. Winging It Wednesday, brought to you by Service Chevrolet Cadillac.
Have a great Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you to our panelists.
Yeah, thanks, guys. 7:57.